Hi, this is Michael Wojcik with the Rochester City Council update for June 15th and 16th, 2015, 1 o'clock in the morning. Meeting just got over with. Um, so many things happened today, probably not going to get them all. Just going to try and hit on some highlights, some good things, some wild things. But, when the meeting goes till 1 in the morning, there's a lot going on. So, first and foremost, June 16th, 9 years ago, our community lost Ariana McNamara, young girl, now the same age as my own daughter, that died as a victim of a careless driver and a poorly designed intersection. And I am so ashamed to say that 9 years later, not a single thing has been done to improve the safety of the intersection where it's happened. And I hope that someday we get serious about the safety of children in this community. But I always remember that day. It's part of the reason why I'm in office now. That was something that got me to sit up and pay attention, and it's part of the reason why I'm as much of an advocate for safe bikeways now. And it's just this time of year, it's always really hard on me, and I'm thinking of the family and thinking of other folks that have lost their kids that should have never happened. To tonight's meeting, a few things. Committee meeting, we had a bunch of items up for review, more department reviews. No dinner meeting tonight. City council meeting, a few things. There are some changes coming to some downtown districts. I've been pushing real hard for staff to make some interim changes to try and make sure that we develop the downtown that we all desire. And we initiated a text amendment tonight that would put a number of restrictions into what can go into most of our core developments, and a lot of these particular things are things that you would not expect to find in a downtown. A mobile home park is no longer allowed in downtown Rochester. Well, duh. I mean, so we just got rid of a bunch of uses that weren't compatible with an urban downtown. So I've been very critical of staff, and frankly, I think for some very good reasons, and more so than the staff, just the process, because, even good staff is going to struggle with a bad process. But this was closing the loop and getting one really positive thing done, and I'm happy to see that change has been initiated. In terms of some police actions tonight, license plate readers are a go, 7-0, and body cams 5-2. Everyone supports the body cameras, but myself and I think Mark Hickey voted against it, both because we want to see the policy before we get the cameras. From my standpoint, I primarily support the cameras for the protection of our police because, with all the bad videos you see of police doing nasty things around the country, I have great faith in the police that we have here. And problem is, if we don't have a policy in place and we do have the cameras, I'm a little bit afraid of what accusations might be made if we're not in compliance with a policy that doesn't exist. So that was my concern, but the body cameras are going to be a good thing. I just hope we can address the data issues and the policy issues that go along with it. We had a few weeks ago, we learned about the issues with the shops on Main roadways that we took on, and we learned about a lot of gaps that failed to be addressed in our process of evaluating infrastructure that we're taking on as a city. A lot of times we enter what's called city owner contracts, and those city owner contracts mean the developers are building infrastructure and then the city takes it. Well, we have 1 year, 2 year warranty, but the problems aren't going to show up until much later. And we're not doing the inspections ourselves, nor are we ensuring that the inspections are done to our level of satisfaction. And we had I thought we had this addressed and changes were being made, but they hadn't been. So I made a motion before approving a couple of these that came forward that now staff has been explicitly directed to fix the quality control problem. And I would expect one of two things. Either we're going to have the staff to do the inspections for this and the developer will pay the full cost of doing that, or we will hire contractors to do the inspection on behalf of the city, and again, the developers will pay the full price of that. It's a way of ensuring that if we're going to do this contract where the developers build the infrastructure for us, we can ensure that the work is done correctly. Next up, the dog leash ordinance. This is one of those things at 12:30 in the morning. Clearly, not everybody was necessarily paying attention as well as they should have been. I had a couple of maybe dumb questions that I thought I maybe wasn't understanding this correctly, but in turning, and putting them out there, it actually there were some issues there that we had to resolve at the last minute that the ordinance did not say what we had intended it to say. So, anyways, I think we got it compatible, and I think that it's a pretty good balance of those advocates for and against the leash ordinance. In particular, those that want to take their pet to an open place and play frisbee. There's not going to be any sort of distance requirements. Would have been kind of ridiculous. And but if you're on a path or a sidewalk or close to other folks or equipment in a park, your dog is expected to be on a leash. And ultimately, this is a complaint driven system, and I know there are a lot of dogs that walk off leash, and they're well behaved and they've been doing it for years. And I think the thing is, if nobody complains, there's not going to be active enforcement. But if somebody does complain, you are expected to be in compliance with the law. And I know that a lot, as is always the case, a lot of people who do nothing wrong, a lot of animals that do nothing wrong, are the victims of those people who are not as responsible. Then we had Chateau Circle, kind of the big long one, and a lot of people talking, very well-informed neighborhood. I think what the neighborhood got was a lot better than, B4 was just atrocious. I mean, that was a disaster, so I'm so grateful that that never happened. You've got a pretty good team there. You've got McGee and Betts with Bill Toynton, and Dave Maris is somebody to have respect for. I don't think we're not dealing with a Mac Hamilton there by any means. So, I think they're going to do a very nice job for the neighborhood. There were a couple details that I didn't particularly. In particular, there's a couple buildings that face right up against the neighborhood, and it's going to look like the backside of Miracle Mile. And there were some process issues where we got changes right before the city council meeting, and we have council members who oscillate between, oh, we can't make any changes at the last minute, and oh yeah, we'll accept these changes, and the inconsistency just kills me. So ultimately we wanted to continue it because there were some last minute changes, and I called out the council a little bit too. It's like, by the way, there was a correction in here that you didn't that maybe you didn't know about, and if you don't know what that correction is, maybe you shouldn't be supporting this. Maybe you should take some time to read it. And they didn't know where it was, but they wanted to go ahead and approve it anyway. So it's kind of disappointing when that happened. So what I did is I tried to make the best of a bad situation. I was going to offer some amendments that did not obligate, but gave the ability for the developer to make it better. For example, there's an access road that separates the backsides of these buildings from the neighborhood. And I was going to I made a motion to just give the developer the option that they didn't have to do that. There were other ways to take access, and it didn't obligate them to do anything, and it allowed them to do a better project. And that amendment failed 4-3. I mean, my mind is blown. How do you vote against something that allows somebody to make a project better if they so choose, but doesn't obligate them to do so? That failed 4-3, and at that point, the neighborhood was sunk. They were not getting anything done at that point, and there are some concerns out there, and frankly, some of the concerns out there were self-inflicted by the neighborhood back when we had the speed table times back there. But it was a well-informed, very smart group of neighbors, very respectful. One person maybe struck a bad tone, but I really appreciate the time the neighbors put in there. I think he deserved a little bit better fate. I think he deserved a little bit more respect from the council on how we did our deliberations. So I'm sorry you didn't get a little better outcome for that. One thing that I don't think it was deliberate, but one thing that the attorney David Pedersen said on behalf of the developer is, he referred to the neighbors as being opponents, and this has been something that I've always felt in the development community, that they really do see as it's always about winning and losing, and it's us against them, and there's not the real effort to work together in a lot of circumstances. And when neighbors hear that, you could just see the looks on their face when he referred to them as opponents. And regardless of whether it was intentional or not, I think it conveyed what's been going on in this community for far too long, and I'm going to continue to fight against that. The biggest problem we had here is, it would have been nice to have a good overlay zone to drop in there, and we got nothing. But I did go through, and I did want to, maybe leave this on a bit of a positive note, that, some things that I really liked. I mean, your neighborhood got a special district. Other neighborhoods we determined were not even worthy of having those kinds of protection. Some of the worst things, like having parking butted up against the neighborhood, for the most part was alleviated. The parking is separated from the neighborhood. Audio is going. I don't think you're gonna have any audio concerns with where potential drive-throughs are. The lighting issues, I think, have been addressed, and a lot of these were just last-minute changes. They weren't a big deal. And you got a pretty good developer that you're working with there, a pretty good team. I was a little bit disappointed because I had some talks with the developers. They didn't even contact me until last week, and I was out of town for about a week. And so I met with them at the last minute. And I thought we had discussed some things we could address. Putting an attractive facade facing the neighborhood as opposed to what I call the back end of Miracle Mile. And I do feel like they kind of hung me out to dry because I got there and they didn't even mention any of the stuff that we had discussed earlier as a possibility. And, obviously I couldn't do anything at the time I made the amendment, but did my best, as always, for the neighbors. Ultimately I do, serve the people in the neighborhoods in this community. They've been my lifeblood. They've been my support. So I thank you for all that. And thank you for watching the video. And, it might be time for me to go to bed at this point. So I'll catch you next time.